Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osenberg501 and today I want to go over what I think is going to be one of the best ways to make gold in Dragonflight. Now at the start of any new expansion, just selling any of the new materials can make you a ridiculous amount of gold, and all those materials are usually massively inflated because everybody's trying to buy up those materials to level up their professions. And that's going to be even more true in Dragonflight because we're getting the massive profession rework. And I think having a character with herbalism and mining is going to be one of the best ways to make just ridiculous amounts of gold, especially right after the expansion is released. And again, this is usually true for most expansions, but because of the new specialization systems for professions, I think this is going to be more true for this expansion, and I think it is going to last quite a bit longer than it did in previous expansions. Usually a few weeks in and all the prices have pretty much tanked and gone to a much more consistent pricing, but I think you'll be able to continue to make just ridiculous amounts of gold off of a few specific things. Now, I don't want to do a full guide in this video on the new specialization systems for professions, but a basic overview is that every profession is going to have a handful of different specializations they can go into, and these specializations will be focused on different parts of that profession. This also does include mining and herbalism, and you'll be able to buff up different aspects of that profession, and you get these knowledge points that you use in these specializations just by gathering different resources, by crafting items, or for doing some daily quests more into the end game. Specifically when talking about herbalism and mining, you're primarily going to get these knowledge points by getting random items from harvesting, and those items will give a different amount of knowledge points that you put into these specialization trees. Now, herbalism and mining have a few specific things that are going to make these professions absolutely ridiculous for making gold. Now, with having these new specialization trees, having dragon riding from the start of the expansion, and not having normal flying from the start of the expansion, you actually don't need to have your gathering professions on a druid anymore. It's pretty much going to put every single class on the same playing field in terms of efficient gathering, because before this, having a druid with these gathering professions would always make it quicker. Even if you didn't have flying, just being able to instantly mount up on the ground would give you an advantage over the other classes, but that's not going to be the case in Dragonflight. And this also means that I would recommend you go for one specific thing right when you start this expansion and start leveling up your herbalism and mining. And both of these professions have this. So for mining, this is going to be a mining process. This is the first profession you should be going into, and your first 35 knowledge points for mining should be into mining process after you unlock it, because that is going to unlock you the skill that allows you to stay mounted while harvesting ore. And this includes your dragon riding mount. So instead of having to constantly jump off your mount, harvest a resource, then jump back on, you're now able to just stay on your mount at all times when harvesting any mineral node. And this is the same for herbalism. If you go into botany and you use your first 40 knowledge points, you will also be able to get this same effect where you can stay mounted while harvesting any herb in this expansion. And also keep in mind, when going through all of this, you are able to max out every single specialization tree at some point. This is just what I would recommend doing at the start of the expansion to make as much gold as you're able to. So once you have gotten enough knowledge points to be able to stay mounted while harvesting, I would recommend you go into the elemental section of both these other specializations. Now, this is going to allow you to get a ton of additional resources when running around and harvesting either ores or different flowers. Now, how this works in Dragonflight is every single node can randomly have a different element or effect around it. And you'll see this different animation around the ore or the flower you're going up to mine. And at a baseline, this will just give you some additional elemental resources, what are essentially this expansion's versions of elemental moats. But if you go into a specific specialization, you're able to actually use a new ability on these different elemental touched nodes. Now for mining, this is mastering the elements, and this lets you learn the overload elemental deposit, which will allow you to go to that elemental touch node, use this new ability on it, which will do something specific depending on what element it is. So for instance, if you come across a ore node and it has the fire element attached to it, what you can do is go up and use this overload element ability, and it will overload that node and it will spawn a fire elemental that once you kill will give you a big chunk of additional resources. Now you're also still able to harvest that node itself as well. So it's giving you a lot of additional resources. And like I mentioned, there are different elements, so every specific element will do something different. So for instance, another element will open up a portal that takes you directly to a new node, or one of the herbalism nodes will launch you into the air and spawn a bunch of flowers below you, which you try to run into with your character while slow falling down, which will give you resources for every one of those flowers you run into while slow falling. And like I mentioned, for mining, it's mastering the elements, and for herbalism, it's called the same exact thing, and the ability itself is also called the same thing. You'll get an actual ability you put on your bar. Now they do have a 12-hour cooldown, but every single node you gather, either for herbalism or for mining, will reduce the cooldown. Now I think it reduces it by 30 minutes each time you harvest something, but I'm not sure if it's exactly 30 minutes. So this will just give you a massive amount of increased materials every time you can use this overload elemental ability. And I think following what I just went over is going to give you the most optimal start for the new expansion. There's always a big gold rush at the start of new expansions to sell as much materials as you can because they're going to be so ridiculously overpriced. So doing this is going to give you an edge in getting as many resources as you possibly can. And then past that point, and past going into what I just went over, I would recommend looking on the auction house and seeing what the current prices of materials are to continue spending points on. Because early on, you're really able to specialize into getting different materials at a much higher rate, getting higher quality of those specific materials, and being able to follow what is currently highest price and putting your knowledge points into those is going to allow you to make much more gold early on. But that's pretty much all I want to go over. I will be having a lot more specialized videos going over more specific ways to make gold from harvesting and just make gold in other ways in the new expansion. But I think if you're somebody that likes harvesting, that has herbalism and mining on one character, I think this is going to be the best start possible. So subscribe if you want to see more WoW or other MMO videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. If you comment down below what you guys think about the new profession system, and thanks for watching.